there's a Psalm 105. Look at this one with me, if you will. Psalm 105. Psalm 105. I'm beginning in verse 26. The psalmist writes, He sent Moses his servant and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They performed his signs among them and miracles in the land of Ham. Ham being a child of Noah, Egypt being one of the children of Ham, and so the Egyptians were descendants of Ham. He sent darkness and made the land dark. They did not rebel against his words. He turned their waters into blood and caused their fish to die. If you didn't know already, now you know what we're talking about. Their land swarmed with frogs, even in the chambers of their kings. He spoke, and there came swarms of flies and gnats throughout their country. He gave them hail for rain and fiery lightning bolts through their land. He struck down their vines and fig trees and shattered the trees of their country. He spoke, and the locusts came, young locusts without number, which devoured all the vegetation in their land and ate up the fruit of their ground. He struck down all the firstborn in their land, the first fruits of all their strength. Then he brought out Israel with silver and gold, and there was none among his tribes who stumbled. Egypt was glad when they departed, for dread of them had fallen upon it. And this leads us all the way up to Exodus chapter 14, before they encounter the seas. But I want to just very, very quickly be reminded of the context in this. At this history between Israel and Egypt, and it started out positive. Joseph was in the land, was given power and position, was able to bring his family in, Jacob and the sons. The family multiplied. But as time went on, they grew in number. This caused the Egyptians to be nervous, Pharaoh to be nervous, and so they were their slaves, and there was harsh treatment to the people. Eventually, God responds to their cries. He hears their cries. And it's beautiful. The text says that God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God says it's go time. And so he sends Moses and Aaron into the land of Egypt to liberate his people. Hits them with the 10 plagues. We're going to talk about this as we go on. You know this account. Pharaoh's a stubborn man. Pharaoh hardened his own heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He says, I'm not going to let him go. And eventually God humbles him with the 10th and final plague. All of the firstborn are taken. From Pharaoh's own home, his firstborn child, to even those in the dungeon, even the livestock, the text says. And so at that point, Egypt is now begging the Israelites, go, get out. At that point, the text says that there were 600,000 men besides women and children. So I think it's safe to say we've got well over 1 million people that are exiting. And there's also a mixed multitude. In other words, some of the Egyptians leave with them. We find out, for example, later on in the Old Testament that there's going to be a young man that blasphemes the name, curses the name of God. His father was an Egyptian, his mother an Israelite. Okay, there was a mixed multitude that went with them. And they're going in haste. And so what ends up happening is they turn to these Egyptians who are terrified and they've not really prepared. And can I have this and that? And they plundered the Egyptians. The Egyptians give it to them. They said, get out of here and go. So they leave having plundered the Egyptians. Not only did they leave, they plundered the Egyptians, the text says. 430 years they've been in Egypt. And for a long time, they've been crying out to their God, liberate us. God leads them out. He decides, you know what, I'm not going to send them by the Philistines lest war happen, and they tuck tail and run back to Egypt. He leads them out in a pillar by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, take it in. Try to imagine you're one of those Israelites. Liberation Day, baby. It's come. We're heading out. Life is good. We got everything we need. We got everything we want. You're looking at your little kid's face, and it's just bright and happy, and life is good. Start writing your songs to Yahweh now. Write them to Jehovah God. He's good. Everything's good. Praising God. We're untouchable. Nothing can get in our way, or so you think. And then God does something sneaky. He does something that you didn't see coming. And it's Exodus chapter 14. Verse 1, Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. In front of Baal Zephon, you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, They are wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. This really stood out this time as I was reading through this text. Something that I'd really not noticed before is how many times this phrase is used, the host. There's very clearly the Pharaoh and his host, and then there's God and his host. And this comes up several times. And the host is defined earlier in the chapter as a host, that is, my people Israel. There's a battle that's taking place at that time. So here we are, we're being liberated, and what God does is he has them back up right to a sea. No escape. And he knows this isn't an accident. He goes, and Pharaoh will see it. I'm going to harden his heart. And what will happen is he's going to say, I'm going to go after these people, and I'm going to get them. I'm going to kill them. And that's exactly what ends up happening. He goes after the people. I want to read something with you. Sorry, I know the mic went out. There's back on, and I'm just going to keep screaming at you. Romans chapter 9. Paul is going to bat for God and his promise of salvation and how that works out. And he makes an example, Romans chapter 9. I'm in verse 14. What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? God wasn't right to do that to the Israelites. He can't do that. He can't free them and then put them up against the sea. He can't do that. By no means, for he says to Moses, that's not the context specifically he was talking about, but I'm adding that in there. But back to Romans 9. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, For this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name shall be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Well, what is molded? Say to its molder, why have you made me this way? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same use, and for another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory? Hey, I'll tell you one thing. Israel wasn't complaining whenever he decided to make them vessels of mercy, were they? They weren't complaining at that point. God had the right to do that. What's your angle, God? Here's my angle. I'm Jehovah God. And I'm going to show the Egyptians that I am God and that there's no other but like me. And there's two parts of this story. I'm going to show what happens to those who rebel against me, and I will show my authority and my wrath. And I'm also going to show how I take care of my own people. Do you see that? Well, you took care of the Israelites because they were just perfect. No. No. They're not going to be saved because of how awesome they are. but they are, at least generally speaking, a God-fearing people. One of you asked me yesterday, we were talking on the phone, having one of these facing the sea moments. And you said, why me? Why me? And I'm with you, my heart's with you. But as we talked about it, and I'm going to say this to the whole group, why not you? Not me. The apostles had to go through some pretty tremendous things, don't you think? Tremendous things. But God is making a point, first of all, of who He is. He will punish those who rebel against Him. Listen, sometimes we just got to say it. And He guides those that are with Him. No, He had the right to do that. Facing seas. So here it goes. Verse 10. I'm in Exodus 14. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. And they feared greatly, and the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Selective memory, I think, on that one. And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will work for you today." Some translate that, which He will fight for you. Work these Egyptians over. For the Egyptians whom you see today you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent, He says. Facing the seas. Listen, we know each other by now, and I feel comfortable in saying we have a spirit that is joined together, and that we try to be a gracious and merciful people. I would hope that none of us would see someone in trial and tribulation and be too quick to judge them. Okay? I understand that, but Sean, you don't know what it's like to have been there, to see your kids like in fear, screaming out, or these kinds of things, and that's true. I don't know what that's like, right? To be too harshly. So we want to be careful, but yet the inspired psalmist, and look at this with me. I'm in Psalm 106. It's impressive how many psalms there are about this account. At the same time, it's not really surprising. This was such a staple event in Israel's history. I'm in Psalm 106, 6 through 8. "Both we and our fathers have sinned. We have committed iniquity. We have done wickedness. Our fathers, when they were in Egypt, did not consider your wondrous works. They did not remember the abundance of your steadfast love, but rebelled by the sea at the Red Sea. Yet He saved them for His name's sake, that He might not make known His mighty power." Listen, the psalmist doesn't give them a pass on this one. He says, no, they rebelled against God. There's nothing wrong whenever you face a sea. Listen to this. There's nothing wrong whenever you face a sea to feel fear. That's totally normal. But what's important is what we do with that fear. This is real time now. We're not talking about God in theory. Yeah, they sing praises to God, right, after He delivered them, and these people are going to end up in just a few days complaining. Generally speaking, this nation, just in case you didn't know, this generation is not viewed in the positive light. There's going to be a tip of the hat to them in Hebrews 11:29. We're going to get to them, that they had faith when they crossed. But generally speaking, these people will end up falling in the wilderness because they have a hardened heart due to their unbelief of God. They immediately turn around, cry out to the Lord, and start complaining to Moses. See, this is what we were telling you. You're here to kill us, didn't you? They rebelled. What are you going to do with that fear? Listen, God's not done with you. I was thinking about this. Whenever he hit them with the 10 plagues, whenever you go back to the text, you're going to see that many times they were protected by the plagues. I mean, literally, even to the point, remember when there was darkness? Goshen had light. I mean, how bizarre was that? If you were in Goshen at that territory, you literally had light. Everyone else was in the dark. But now, what God ends up doing is not only is he going to make a point to the world that I am Jehovah God and there's none like me, he also needs for his people to feel it. I'm going to put you against a sea so you can feel the heat, so you can understand the intensity, because there's something that I need you to see going forward. Who I am. You need to have that being unprotected. You need to have that moment where you feel like, no, this is it, and there's no rational explanation out of this. Because God then is going to see, what will you do with this? I don't have a problem that you're afraid. I want to know what you're going to do with that fear. He's not done with you. 1 Corinthians chapter 10:13 talks about that he will not allow you to be tempted beyond your ability, but will provide a way of escape. Let's not forget, by the way, that whenever he initially led them out, he did not lead them by the Philistines. That one, God said, would be no good for them. They'll see war and tuck back. This one, he says, no, they're going to face this one. Think about that. We forget that. And then here we go, walking through the water. Verse 15, the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces, and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, all the hosts of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained, but the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. It always surprises you. You read through this, and it's powerful, but you read through it quickly, but like, that's it. That's Exodus 14. That's the passage that explains the whole thing. You've heard this. How many times have you heard this growing up? Imagine, though, if you're an Israelite boy or girl, an Israelite adult, how many times you heard that account? They heard it many more times than you and I have heard it. It was a staple of their community, right? They crossed on dry ground. It's one thing to have heard it a lot, but let's take it a step forward. What if you were actually that generation who saw it? Oh, I know, Joshua, you've heard this many times, but I was there. You don't know what that was like. We got some pretty cool graphics in movies now. You know, they made some movies. We had someone back. What was the Ten Commandments? Was it 70s? 60s? 50s? Okay, it was back there. Graphics were okay for that time. It's pretty good. We're going to find out one day, by the way, that Moses didn't have a beard. And you're all going to be very disappointed in that. Graphics were okay. We had some more to come out. Graphics are incredible. Can't do it justice. Cannot do it justice. You can't smell the salt water. The whole movie, Ten Commandments, we still have it at home. I love watching it. He gets a staff and the waters go back. That's not accurate. That's not what happened. All night long. All night long, actually, it happened. A fierce wind. Some of the Psalms looked like there was thunder and lightning, like a storm going on. Now, try to picture that. Try to picture hearing a wind strong enough to split a sea all night long. I wonder if they felt the remnant maybe of some of that wind. All night long. The pillar of cloud behind you. Now look at your kid's face. Now look at your kid's face. And then it's go time. What are you crying out to me for? Tell him. Go forward. Men, I wonder, would you give the old ladies first? I've always wondered that first person, were they just, or were they kind of out there? And this is where the Hebrew writer, look at this, Hebrew writer, chapter 11. He acknowledges this, because this was an act of faith. Verse 29, by faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. It's go time now. And God says, now I've done my part. I've done all the work here. You go forward. And of course, the obvious question is, will the waters hold up? And the people said the waters will hold up. That's why, to me, whenever I talk about faith for myself, I think about it with the term trust. And I don't mean to diminish. I understand it's a strong trust, not trust like we typically use. A wholehearted trust in God. And there it is. Listen. What we're learning, whenever you're facing storms, whenever you're facing seas, God's not trying to kill you. He's not trying to kill you. Who was God going to kill? Let's just be blunt. Egyptians. But there was something that he was trying to kill among the Israelites, and that was doubt. I'm trying to kill the doubt inside of you. How is it that I just freed you and you forgot already what I've done? And we misunderstand that. God's wanting to know. I think I just assumed this. Can I just say this? I believe that God still operates in this way today. I believe that God allows us to be in situations that seem overwhelming, situations where it seems like there's no out, and He wants to know what we're going to do. And so it's hard to view it this way, and I want to talk about this, but I think it's actually a blessing from God. I think it shows His mercy and His grace. Let's consider some of the Psalms again. 136. Psalm 136. One 10 through 15. Here's how this psalmist views it. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, for his steadfast love endures forever, and brought Israel out from among them, for his steadfast love endures forever. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who divided the Red Sea in two, for his steadfast love endures forever, and made Israel pass through the midst of it. Why did he do that? No, for his steadfast love endures forever. But overthrew Pharaoh and his hosts in the Red Sea, for his steadfast love endures forever. To him who led his people through the wilderness, for his steadfast love endures forever. That psalmist didn't look back at it the same way. Let me show you another psalm, Psalm 77. I'm in verse 10. Then I said, I will appeal to the ears of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. You with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock at the hand of Moses and Aaron. I've always enjoyed verse 19. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. Y'all remember that poem, Footprints in the Sand? Y'all remember that one? It's like at least one of your grandma had to have it hanging on her wall growing up. You can see it. This person's, I had a dream that I was walking with Jesus on the sea. And in the sky, all my life started to flash. But then I realized that through the really difficult times, I looked and there was only one pair of feet in the sand. And I became troubled. And so I finally asked the Lord, why, Lord? You said you would walk beside me. But yet whenever it got really rough, there was only the one pair in the sand. And the Lord said, oh, my child, I was carrying you through those times. And it's a beautiful poem. It really is. It'd be a fool to walk in all those Egyptians, I don't know, 600,000 men plus women and children, a lot of people. It'd be a fool to see all those footprints and go, I just didn't see God through this one. I love you, but you moron. God is there. We don't see him. I get that. You get that. But he's there. He led me up to a sea. I know, and he has the right to do that. But he's caring for you. Maybe he's teaching you something. Maybe he's trying to kill some doubt in you. You don't understand this until you're in it. Listen, whenever you're facing a sea, you don't need some scholar, do you? You just need him to help you, don't you? I'm there. What do I do, Lord? You just be silent. You just be silent. And then when I part the seas and I ask you to go forward, then you go forward. Lord, they're hurting me. They're bothering me, and I'll work them over. But you trust in me. Yeah, it's not complicated. There it is. And we go forward. Paul wrote to the church in Colossae, therefore, as you receive Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. The faith, you know, the sad thing is Hebrews chapter 11:29 talks about the faith of them crossing the sea. Hebrews chapter 11:30 talks about Jericho. What happened to the generation? Why just skip 40 years? You know why they skipped 40 years. There was nothing else to talk about. They died in the wilderness. Because of their unbelief, brother, sister, keep walking the walk. Jesus Christ took that road before you did. And he took that road and he walked it to Calvary. And he went up on that hill and he gave his life for you. Oh, and Satan and all the evil and all the heavenly hosts, they're all looking, oh, he's dead. He's dead. It's over with. He's over with. We're defeated. And God says, just hold on a few days. Just hold on a few days. You'll see. The battle's already been won. You just got to figure out whose side you're on. Amen? So get on the right side. Be courageous whenever you're facing these seas. He's with you, my friend.